Think back to the earliest memory you have. Maybe a birthday, maybe a kitchen, maybe a face leaning over a crib. Now ask yourself something strange. Why does it start there? Why not earlier? You were awake before that memory. You were learning, crying, laughing, forming attachments long before that. So where did all of it go? Your brain was recording. It just wasn't keeping the footage. This gap has a name. Scientists call it infantile amnesia. It's the reason almost no one remembers anything before the age of 3 or 4. Sigmund Freud noticed this pattern over a century ago and gave it its name, though his explanation for it turned out to be almost entirely wrong. He thought your mind was actively repressing early memories, burying them because they were too disturbing to keep. Modern research tells a very different story. Your brain wasn't hiding those years. It was still under construction. Here's the strange part. Babies do form memories, real ones, just not the kind you'd recognize as memories. Psychologist Carolyn Rovi Collier spent decades proving this with a simple, elegant setup. She tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Kick your leg, the mobile spins. Babies as young as 2 or 3 months old figured this out almost instantly. Weeks later, when researchers brought back the same mobile, the babies kicked immediately before anyone reminded them what to do. The memory was still there. It had simply gone dormant, waiting for the right cue to wake it up. So the memory existed. But could the baby tell you about it? No. And that's the real key to this whole mystery. There's a difference between remembering how to do something and remembering that something happened to you. Psychologists call these two systems by different names. One is procedural memory, the skills and reflexes your body holds on to without needing words. The other is episodic memory, the kind that lets you mentally travel back in time and relive a moment, a scene, a feeling of, I was there. Memory researcher Endel Tulving spent much of his career mapping this second kind, showing that reliving a memory is fundamentally different from simply knowing a fact. Riding a bike, tying your shoes, flinching at a loud noise, all procedural, still intact from childhood. But the birthday party, the crib, the face leaning over you, episodic. And episodic memory needs infrastructure your infant brain hadn't built yet. What kind of infrastructure are we talking about? A brain region called the hippocampus. Think of it as the mind's filing clerk. It doesn't create your experiences, but it stitches them into a timeline you can later pull up and walk through. In infancy, this filing clerk is still learning the job. The neurons are there. The wiring isn't finished. New neurons are still being added to the hippocampus during early childhood, and every new addition can disrupt existing connections before they've had a chance to stabilize into long-term storage. It's like renovating a library while people are still trying to check out books. Nothing filed during the renovation survives the process intact. But there's a second piece to this puzzle, and it's one most people never consider. Language. Developmental psychologist Patricia Bauer has shown that a child's ability to hold on to autobiographical memories tracks closely with their growing command of language. Before you have words, you don't have a story. And memory, real episodic memory, the kind you can call up years later, seems to depend on being able to narrate your own experience to yourself, even silently. A toddler who hasn't yet learned to say, "We went to the park," and the dog barked, has no scaffolding to hang that day on. The experience happened. It just never got bound into a sentence your future self could retrieve. So here's where it gets almost unsettling. Your brain, in those earliest years, was you. It was awake, forming attachments that shaped your entire personality. And none of it is retrievable, not because it's gone, but because it was never filed in a format your adult mind knows how to open. Does that mean those years don't matter? Quite the opposite. Attachment researchers have long argued that the bonds formed in infancy, the sense of safety or anxiety a baby absorbs from a caregiver, shape behavior for the rest of a person's life, even without a single conscious memory attached to them. You could be sitting in a job interview right now, feeling a flash of unexplained nervousness around authority, and some of that reaction could trace back to a pattern set before you could form a single sentence. You wouldn't recognize the source. You'd just feel the effect. That's a strange kind of haunting, isn't it? Being shaped by a version of yourself you can never visit. And this is where the story takes its most counterintuitive turn. Because your earliest memories, the ones you do have, from age 3 or 4 onward, aren't perfect recordings either. They're reconstructions. Every time you recall your 5th birthday, your brain isn't playing back a tape. It's rebuilding the scene from fragments, filling gaps with plausible details, sometimes borrowing pieces from photographs you've seen or stories your family has told so many times that you now believe you witnessed them yourself. Memory researchers have shown again and again that people can come to sincerely believe in childhood events that never happened, simply because those events were suggested to them convincingly and often enough. Your earliest true memory might not even be a memory of the event. It might be a memory of the retelling. So the picture that emerges is unsettling and oddly comforting at once. You are not missing a video file from your first 3 years. There was never a file to lose. Your infant brain wasn't a smaller version of your adult brain, quietly filming everything and locking the reels away. It was a completely different kind of machine, one built for absorbing patterns, forming bonds, and learning a body, not for authoring a timeline. The timeline only comes online once language, self-awareness, and a mature hippocampus arrive together, sometime around your 3rd or 4th birthday. Which means the person who took your first steps, who heard your parents' voices for the very first time, who felt the world as entirely new, is not someone you can remember being. You can only be told about them. Why does that matter today? Because you are still doing something similar right now, just less dramatically. Studies on memory formation in adults suggest that anything experienced without attention, without being turned into a story in your head, tends to evaporate the same way. Ever driven somewhere on autopilot and arrived with no memory of the drive at all? You were there. Your body did the work. But nothing got filed, because nothing got narrated. Infantile amnesia isn't some ancient artifact you outgrew and left behind. It's a preview of a rule your mind still follows, in miniature, every single day. Next time you catch yourself trying and failing to remember your first steps, or your first word, or the sound of your mother's voice before you knew what a mother was, stop trying to find the footage. There isn't any. What there is instead is quieter and, in its own way, more remarkable. A version of you that existed before memory itself, shaping the person reading these words right now, without ever needing to be remembered at all.